Seaton, author, and this book is very personal. Just like you said, I have written many books that I have talked about different parts of my story, but in all of those books, I wrote through characters. I had a character named Sheila and a Christina, and I've had a lot of different characters. The difference in Innocence Taken is in this book, I actually said I for the first time. And so it took me almost a year to get to the point of being comfortable enough to say I, because as we were talking about with the question earlier, I was so protective of my abusers that I gave people character names, and I said this happened to all these other people, even though I told the real stories. But I talked to several people that have kind of went through some things that I went through, and they were like, you get your real healing when you finally say I. And so in this book, I finally said I when I was molested, when I was abused. And it did do something for me mentally to be able to finally say I, because it's like my voice was muzzled for 48 years. When I did express my molestations to my parent when I was in high school, I held it for 17 years. Well, I was 4 the first time, so I held it for 13 years that I had been molested by one of my mother's brothers and by one of my father's cousins. And when I first, when I was 17, I had the courage to tell a parent, and it wasn't accepted the way I thought it was going to be accepted. And so when you finally get the voice to actually say something, and then I said it, and in our culture, there's this thing that what happens in this house stays in this house. And so I went to my parent and I told my parent in a very vulnerable moment what happened to me, and the response was, you were fast. And in our culture, what that means is that I asked for it. I was 4 years old, and I was told that I was fast, which meant that I did something to provoke this, that I was, another word I guess would be that I was sexual, that I brought this on myself. And I remember thinking to myself, I was 4 years old, how did I ask for my uncle to molest me? How did I ask for my father's cousin to do these things to me? And then I remember thinking to myself, with my father's cousin, why didn't anybody stop this guy from making me walk to the store with him? I'm 4. He's not my brother. He's like my second or third cousin. And he keeps asking me, well, he doesn't even ask me, I'm a kid. So he just keeps voluntarily taking me to the store with him, but we weren't going straight to the store. We were going behind the store. And nobody in their right mind in my family ever thought that this wasn't a good idea. I'm still to this day trying to figure that part out. Like, I can't even imagine a second, third cousin just walking in and telling me they're going to take my son anywhere. I can't understand that. But that was the case with what happened in that situation. And with my mother's brother, I was not the only person in the family that this happened to. I have 4 or 5 other female cousins that this happened to as well. He done these things to all of us, and nothing ever happened. Every time any of us said something, it fell on deaf ears, and I later found out it was generational. This is something that had taken place in my family, incest. And so a lot of times, hurt people, as they say, hurt people hurt people. And so when you are the one to stand up and finally say, you know what, I'm going to talk about this because I need to get healed. I had 3 failed marriages. I got married at 19. Gentleman that I was dating, we were best friends, and we dated. It was not a love factor. It was I was going through trouble at home. One of my abusers was one of my parents. And so to marry him was an escape from that reality. When it got to the point of, okay, the proposal, the marriage, it looked more like, will you marry me? Listen, I want to tell you something first, though. I cheated on you with about 7 different women. And this confession came with it. And because of the level of brokenness that I had, having been abused multiple times by relatives, having my family member abuse me to the point that if my sister didn't lay her body on top of mine, the beating wouldn't stop. My sister would literally have to get on top of me to stop the hits. When you go through those things, you're broke. You're broke. And so when this gentleman proposed to me and made this confession, my understanding was that he loved me. Because if he didn't love me, he wouldn't have confessed this. So he told me he cheated on me. He's telling me this because I can trust him. He's going to tell me. He's not going to let me not know things. And so I married him in my brokenness. And I ended up with a book called Abusive Christian Marriage. Because, obviously that didn't work out. But in brokenness, that's what love looked like to me. I got married a second time, and I was in a relationship for 11 years. And after 11 years, and me helping him get through nursing school, he decided he didn't want to be married anymore. And so once again, I found myself in a place of brokenness again. But in that marriage, what I learned was that I had let that relationship become an idol. And it's really important that when we go through things, we have to understand the lesson behind it. Because if you don't understand the lesson, you repeat the cycle, right? And so in that relationship, I honestly think that the Lord allowed that relationship to crash because I had allowed my love for that person to become an idol. And so the third relationship, marriage, we were married almost a year. We were almost married a year. We got married and we had my son. We got married and had my son. I have an older son that's 29 and my son is 9. I actually started over in life at the request of me having a child. And then my 3rd month of pregnancy, he decided that's not what he wanted anymore. And in brokenness, you keep choosing partners who don't qualify, but you don't know what, it's kind of like show me love and you've never seen love, but you're looking for it. How do you see something you've never, how do you get something you've never had? It's just like telling me to bring you a speaker, but I've never seen a speaker. But I knew I wanted it, right? I knew I wanted to be loved, but I did not understand fully what love was about. And so all of my childhood trauma is where I'm going with this. All of my childhood trauma, wanting to be loved, wanting to be accepted, wanting to have a family, wanting to fit in, is what caused me to continually keep making those bad decisions, because they did a little bit to make me feel like I was loved in that moment. And it wasn't until I had to get myself together with the Lord spiritually that I realized I didn't love myself, because I didn't have a standard of what love looked like. I didn't have standards for relationships. I didn't have boundaries for someone else to respect, to be able to say you qualify, and then once I finally got myself into a position of loving myself more than I set standards, I set boundaries of what I would accept, what I would not accept. And I thank God for that. In this book, it really forced me to relive some stuff. Writing this book, I think I had kind of, you can make yourself forget some things that you don't want to think about, that you don't want to remember. And in writing the book, because my abuse wasn't just from a parent, it was also from family members as well. And these same family members, one of them I lived in the house with my abuser. When my parents got divorced, we moved in with my grandparents, and this uncle lived in the house. So I had to see my abuser almost every day. And I had to pretend it didn't happen because nobody else in the house knew it happened. And I had to be on edge every day because I didn't know if he would ever take a moment that no one was around to try it again. And so, that was a very stressful thing to go through. I honestly, I don't know why I'm still in my right mind other than the grace of God, to have had to go through that. I think that just the power of the Holy Spirit helping me to get through that, because when I think back on it now, seeing him every day, I don't know how. I'm serious. I really don't know how I did that for years. But this book, it talks about all forms of abuse, as you stated earlier. His perspective was from visualization as well as the foster care system, and seeing people fight, seeing people, standing in between people while they're fighting, while people are holding weapons and I'm in the middle of them trying to stop them from fighting, not even taking into consideration that I could have lost my life during that process. I just grew up in a very dysfunctional family, not only the sexual abuse, but mental, emotional. It just went on and on. And one of the most traumatic parts that I think, when I think of in the dysfunctional family setting, is my grandfather had mental illness, and often he would do things that just made no sense. And I grew up in that house, and so I remember at night when we would be asleep, he would set what is called smoke bombs. He would set a tile on fire. He would set paper on fire. He would set things on fire in the house, inside the house, and you would wake up in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke, not knowing if the house was actually on fire or if he was just doing his smoke bomb, which he said would kill mosquitoes. That is a horrific thing to experience, waking up in the middle of the night, smelling smoke, not knowing if your house is really on fire or if this is another smoke bomb. And that's on top of the molestations, on top of the beatings, on top of all these other things. Yeah.